This podcast was produced by OAR FM Dunedin with support from New Zealand On Air.
Welcome to Disabled Persons Assembly's Notable Radio Show. DPA is a systemic advocacy organisation run by and for disabled people. DPA is a pan-impaired organisation with members across the country. Over the next half hour, we'll discover how we can work collaboratively to achieve inclusion for all New Zealanders. DPA's Notable Radio Show, a whole new attitude.
Kia ora koutou, my name is Amy Taylor and I'm here on DPA Notable Radio, and in today's program we're going to chat about the very recent turnaround that our Disability Issues Minister Louise Upston has come up with on reversing the controversial restrictions to disability funding, specifically flexible support funding. So I'm not here to give you DPA's official position. That will come over the next couple of weeks. But I am here to share some of the views from our disabled community on this recent turnaround and give you a little bit of the history of what got us to this point over the last year. So what happened was I was lying in bed, as you do, on early in the morning, scrolling through Facebook. I'm sure this is a common pursuit for many of us. And there I was, just scrolling along, and I came across this announcement that changed mine and basically everybody I know's life pretty fundamentally. An announcement that said that the government, the national government, was going to put some freezing and tightening up on flexible spending rules. They were going to limit access to equipment modification services and slash respite care, and this was happening as of today. No notice period, no consultation with the disability community. And as you can imagine, we were outraged. We were all outraged. It sparked perhaps the biggest recent mobilization of the disability community in New Zealand that has happened. So lots of people went online and they connected with other people and they said, this is ridiculous. How is this happening? And we all got together and we decided to organize some marches. So I head up the Dunedin Disability Funding protest marches, and we organised 3 marches, and we marched through the city of Dunedin, through the Octagon, and we had some speeches set up, and we told the government in no uncertain terms that this was simply unacceptable. Disabled people rely on this funding, and the reason that it is flexible is because we know what we need. There is no way that some person sitting out there in the beehive in Wellington can actually dictate what disabled people need. Disabled people know their own needs. And this mobilization, in a way, was a very positive thing for the disabled community. It got us together and it got us thinking. However, we were still faced with the fact that we was really struggling with these immediate cuts that affected so many people. And I remember at the time being in a meeting about DPA's direction. An advocate and author, Henrietta Bollinger, spoke out, and she said something along the lines, I don't remember Henrietta's exact words, but she said something along the lines of, I don't feel like with these changes we can focus on anything else. This is so fundamental to the lives of disabled people in Aotearoa, New Zealand, that we need to focus on reversing this change. And this stood out to me as such a testament to how fundamental these changes were and how much this government had actually instantly messed with the lives of so many vulnerable people. And it was absolutely not to their credit. So what did DPA do? So in May 2024, DPA issued an open letter backed by 52 organisations urging ministers Ministers Louise Upton and Nicola Willis to fully reverse the March funding restrictions and ensure that disabled people have the resources and flexibility that they need to thrive. DPA Chief Executive Mojo Mathers emphasised that support for disabled people had long been piecemeal and inequitable, and stressed how it was time for the government to reverse the policies that were holding disabled people back and demonstrate that it truly values disabled people, their whānau and carers as essential members of Aotearoa New Zealand's communities. So that was about a year ago now, and over the last year, numerous media articles have come out expressing how the disabled community is struggling with these changes, with these cuts to funding, and how it is affecting caregivers. So just a couple of days ago now, we had, well, let's go back a little bit. So let's not say we didn't win the battle. In some ways, the government gave in slightly in the coming months after the March 2024 announcement. One of the things that they did were they loosened up the rules for carer support very, very slightly. They had banned purchasing outright, and instead they made a very short list of things that you could purchase, mainly for children with high sensory needs, which I was very grateful for because I have children with high sensory needs. But essentially, the funding freeze remained in place. So, responding to community outcry, Disability Issues Minister Louise Upton has now reversed, as of a few days ago, these controversial restrictions. However, this doesn't come into effect for current users, essentially, until April 2026, where they will restore flexibility and support on how funding is used, and in theory institute a fairer nationwide assessments through NASC providers, both for disabled people and their families. However, it's a very long wait for most people between now and April 2026, and people are not entirely sure on how this is going to pan out. New assessments will begin in February 2026. However, those who have existing flexible fundings will not get their updated budgets until April. So it's really up in the air on actually what is going to happen for our disabled people and their whānau over the coming months. And while many people are cautiously optimistic that this is a positive change, we're also wholly aware that we're coming up to an election year, so motivations might not be purely pure, so to speak. And we'd also like to see how this actually pans out for people and what this actually results in. So as I said, I'm not here to give DPA's official statement on this matter. What I would like to share with you is some voices of some prominent disabled people in our local Dunedin community and in the wider Aotearoa New Zealand disabled community, who have very kindly given their time and their permission to share their thoughts on the recent announcements. So I'm going to start out with Anya Kelly Costello. Anya is somebody I know quite well, although strangely enough, I've actually only met her once, the wonders of the internet. She is a disabled person and she is very well embedded in the disability community, and she is a user of individualized funding. So let's hear what Anya has to say, and I'll be reading people's words. Unfortunately, I would have loved to have got some recordings, but we didn't have time for that. So I think that achieving a great deal of flexibility over funding allocations is a win for the disability community. Acknowledging the alignment of this aim with enabling good lives approach. but saying that I'm extremely cautious about this overall announcement. I think we should approach it with great skepticism. Announcements that reallocate only funding not the funding amount, because we've consistently seen this overseas. Here, a squeezing and tightening of the allocations as the years go by, but telling us that all our interim budgets next year will be based on the spend between June 2023 and June 2025. We can already foresee this tightening coming down the tracks from us. Anya is saying this because that period is when there has been a freeze on funding, so people would not have been using their allocated funding during a large period of that time. So unfortunately, that won't be a particularly fair reflection on actually the funding that people need. I hope that whānau and carers' needs being assessed at the same time will be a positive development and take a holistic approach. And I hope it will be used as won't be used as a backdoor for restricting overall spending. Also, the announcement makes a lot out of the idea that there is greater equality now. However, it is yet to touch the ACC disability services chasm. So what Anya means by this is that ACC funded disabled people tend to have a lot more access to resources than those funded by disability support services. Nor has it examined the diagnostic and narrowly circumscribed eligibility criteria, which cause a huge number of people to be ineligible for any support in the first place. What Anya is talking about here is that generally these assessments are diagnosis-based rather than function-based. And unfortunately, that means that a lot of people, for example, those living with chronic illness, are left out of being able to access the funding they need because their diagnosis just happens to fall under a lower funding category. And then we hear from Emma Kate Lamb. Emma says that, I think all I can say is this should never have happened without consultation, because then it would never have happened. Disability and associated supports requirements are diverse, and the funding must reflect that for individuals to lead to meaningful and purposeful lives. Disability is expensive, and that's a reality that we all face in our everyday lives, is that actually there are a number of associated costs towards disability that many people do not even think about. Things like convenience, food, taxis rather than being able to use your own car, and any other number of expenses that disabled people face that able-bodied people in the community don't have to face. And then we hear from Dr. Huhana Hiki. I don't know whether you've heard of Huhana Hiki. You should have done. She's a very prominent disabled lawyer. Huhana Hiki has MS, and she's a Maori person. So she has a very good and important viewpoints that we should actually be looking to her for the viewpoints of the Māori community. So here's what Huhani has to say. This current coalition's owe us disabled, our whānau, our allies, and our peers an apology for the way they have denied us the right to travel and be at whānau events. And they should compensate all disabled people for the barriers they place on us. Why? Well, if you think they will be fair with this new budget or flexible funding, remember they will be taking our funding from the last 2 years after they've made the budget cuts, and they will reduce our each budget to meet that despite the savings we've made. We could pay for carers' costs when we travel. It is empty promises. They have breached 3 articles from the UNCRPD, and they have breached Titiriti and their own agreement to provide us with supports and services. Until our voice is listened to, we will resist, and we will continue resisting as we have spent decades seeking our rights, and we will keep doing it so that the next generation doesn't have to fight as hard for the rights that we have fought for and won. although lost again. Hopefully it's temporary as our rangatahi are empowered and will be fight back. So be assured, 25% of a voting bloc should be looked at by if any political party wants our vote. Strong words from Dr. Huhana Heki. And Wendy Wicks is a long-time DPA member. Wendy has told us, we are told of a reversal of cuts to disability flexible funding, but I hold little hope that that will benefit disabled people. I believe that this is all about money and the savings that will be made from the disability sector. In the announcement are measures like standardized pared back needs assessments that herald less choice, fewer options. And I think that Wendy's voice and Huana's voice and the voice of Anya and Emma Kate that we have spoken to all hold a very similar theme of skepticism on whether this government actually has the needs of the disabled community first and foremost in their minds when they are putting these changes together. There is a real view of skepticism that actually what is happening is they are trying to enhance their votes for the next election, and perhaps also that they are trying to save some money. So the next voice we hear from is a caregiver voice. So Emily McClelland is a caregiver of a little girl who has an intellectual disability or learning disability. So she says, the March 2024 changes to flexible funding have had such a detrimental impact on our lives. I felt completely blindsided and it caused me a lot of distress and despair. I was already burnt out from being a parent carer. I felt more overwhelmed by how full on my life is caring for my high needs, intellectually disabled preteen daughter. Every day after the changes were made, I felt a little more and more hopeless, isolation and depression at the situation. I felt like this government cared nothing for disabled people and their families. By taking away the flexibility, they took away our ability to provide the tools that would help our disabled family members thrive and be more independent, or help them regulate and find their calm. Our life is pretty full on. My daughter, in general, finds many things in life challenging and overwhelming. And since the changes, the quality of life for my daughter went downhill. She has, in my opinion, regressed in her life skills and her personal cares. Every day is a struggle for her, and she is not coping. It is hard as a parent to witness this, and I feel like a failure as a parent, when really the things that would help her cope are out of reach because of the lack of flexibility in funding. The funding was our lifeline. I used the funding to buy items that were of great benefit to her and help make our lives a little bit easier, help her to regulate and keep her calmer. Some examples were a trampoline and a swing set. I wanted to buy other items I knew that would be of great benefit to her to help her cope with her life, but then the changes happened. Day-to-day life was already hard for my daughter to find basic life skills, overwhelming, and I've had to do just about everything for her that I know that she is capable of doing a lot of it herself, but is too heightened to do it herself. It is such a relief to have the changes reversed, but it's a shame we have to wait until April next year to be able to use the budget in the best way that will benefit those it's intended to help. Meanwhile, we see our loved ones struggle with their day-to-day lives. It's cruel and inhumane to have to wait that long when the government was so quick to make the changes March 2024. Why can't they reinstate it how it was back now? So very strong words from Emily, who is a caregiver, parent caregiver, that actually really highlight the day-to-day struggles that caregivers of high needs individuals actually have. And this is not a disabled person versus caregiver fight. We are not at odds with each other. We are together and united with caregivers on this because these changes have affected both caregivers and disabled people. So it's really important that we include the voices of caregivers and their day-to-day struggles. So I will share with you just a couple more short voices before we close up for today's program. So Kay Jones says, Minister Upton stopped the payments and then is restarting them again, but frozen at 2023 levels. No support for newly disabled or diagnosed people. And she wants us to be grateful enough to vote for her in the party's next election. I don't think so. This is typical National Party behaviour. Criticise Labour for spending too much on something good, cut the funding savagely in the middle of an electoral term, and then restore some of the funding close to the next election. Meanwhile, National spends big on tax cuts for mates and equipment for military forces on roads. Big picture is that National cares more for things than for people. Those are very strong words from Kay Jones. I would like to reiterate that these are the opinions of the individuals whose names are mentioned and not of DPA. I will read one more and then we will close off for today's program. Roger Lovelace says, people with disabilities are a diverse range of people with a wide range of conditions and impairments. One size will never fit us all. We don't want to have to justify things time and time again. My care and my carers' needs are changing, and this must be recognised. Costs increases are just one side of the situation. We need to properly evaluate the benefits to us, our carers, and wider society. This will prove that we are worth it. And I think that's also a really important theme that Roger points out, is that actually disabled people are valuable in our society, and sometimes we don't feel particularly valued, we don't feel particularly prioritized. And there's a big push, a big movement in the disabled community, and has been over a number of years, to actually get our value reinstated so people understand that disabled people are valuable to society. So thank you for listening. I know it's a lot, but it is a lot for the disabled community. We have had a really rough run of this, and I look forward to hearing DPA's official statement on this, and I hope you enjoyed listening to some views from our disabled community. Ka kite.
Disabled Persons Assembly is Aotearoa, New Zealand's first pan-disability national organisation, providing system-level advocacy for all disabled people. Membership is free for individuals. If you'd like to know more, visit our national website at www.dpa.org.nz or contact your local kaituitui or community connector, Amy Taylor, at kaituitui.otipoti@dpa.org.nz. Disabled Persons Assembly, a whole new attitude.
This podcast was produced by OAR FM Dunedin with support from New Zealand On the Air.